Welcome along to the transfer show. Just 6 days left of what has already been a record-breaking window. Is there still time for the biggest transfer in British football history to go through in the shape of Alexander Isak? Vardy secured his move away from Crystal Palace at the weekend, but will club captain Marc Guehi also leave Selhurst Park before the deadline? It's been a busy summer of business already at Old Trafford. We'll have the latest on potential incomings and outgoings at Manchester United. And it's been a miserable start to the season for West Ham. We'll look at their desperate need to do business between now and 5 o'clock. Well, there we are. It's been quite a summer in every sense for Crystal Palace. It's going to be a very eventful last few days too. By the looks of things, as you can see, Rob Dorset, Harvey Elliott alongside me. Harvey, time running out then for Marc Guehi to make his move. What's the latest?
Well, there's lots of talk that Marc Guehi could end up being a Liverpool player before the window closes. The situation is that no new approach has been made for Marc Guehi yet. So as things stand, he's still a Crystal Palace player and he's preparing for Crystal Palace's really important European playoff game in Norway on Thursday night. Now, he's turned down the offer of a new contract and he's in a really, really strong position. Of course, he's aware that Liverpool are interested in signing him, and I think if the price was right, Crystal Palace would let him go if they can sign a replacement. And we know they're in the market to try and sign a replacement. And the reason I say he's in a really strong position is because he knows in January he could sign an agreement with a foreign club because he'll be a free agent next summer. And the kind of clubs we're talking about are clubs of the calibre of Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus. Those could all be options for him in January. That's why I think compared to some of the other players who are very unhappy with their situations and are trying to force through a move, Marc Guehi is not in that boat at all. He is very happy at Crystal Palace until he's told that the situation has changed.
It's a really interesting one, Carver, isn't it? Because you and I have both been working on this story, and I think it's pretty clear that there's quite a lot of power in Marc Guehi's hands here. I think both clubs have kind of backed off for him to decide what he wants to do, is the impression I get from talking to people. And so, and I think he's a little bit conflicted about what he wants to do because he has an incredible loyalty to Crystal Palace. They've given him an opportunity that got him into the England squad, and so he isn't absolutely convinced that now is the right time to leave when he's got all those options that Carve's talking about next summer as well. But of course, Liverpool is a huge football club, and he will clearly be very excited at that prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. Carve, if Guehi does go, does that pave the way for Manuel Akanji to go to Palace?
Well, look, I think he's a player who Palace are interested in. He may leave Manchester City before the window closes, but clubs like Galatasaray are also interested in him. So if he was to leave, I mean, it's a big step down. When you leave Manchester City, you leave the Champions League. I'm not sure at this stage of his career would he want to go from Manchester City to Crystal Palace, for instance. But they are definitely looking in the market. A lot of agents are aware of the fact that Crystal Palace want to sign another centre-back. And the reason they want to sign another centre-back is because they don't want to lose Marc Guehi for nothing next summer. I think some people at Crystal Palace would be happy for him to stay and leave for nothing next summer. I think some people at the club think, let's get another season out of him, and he's happy to stay. But I think if you speak to sort of agents and intermediaries, a lot of people are working on potentially trying to get a centre-back into Crystal Palace. Just
with all these kind of angles on Marc Guehi, is it a risk for him to be playing Thursday night? Because whenever it moves are getting close and deadlines are approaching, he's got a plastic pitch in Norway, I understand, on Thursday night, and we don't know what can happen.
Well, we had the sort of whole on-off situation with Eze. If you remember, a week ago, seems like a lifetime ago, but a week ago there was talk that he was going to go to Spurs, but that deal was held up because Crystal Palace wanted him to play against Fredrikstad in the first leg at Selhurst Park. And then when he agreed a deal with Arsenal, he didn't play in that game because Oliver Glasner said he didn't feel right mentally and physically. But I think the Guehi situation is different because he's happy to play. He knows he's a Crystal Palace player until he's told differently. Now, it is a little bit of a risk for Crystal Palace, of course, because if they are planning on selling him after the game on Thursday, then, as you say, playing on a plastic pitch in Norway maybe could be a little bit tricky. But I think Marc Guehi's got a very good injury record, and it's not the kind of plastic pitches that you and I were used to when we were kids. I think they're a bit more advanced and developed.
Rob, Carvey mentions Eberechi Eze, of course, who's gone now to Arsenal. That money is there to be spent. They obviously were talking about wanting replacements before he went. Bilal El-Khanous looked like that might be happening. Understands you've been digging around, dead in the water.
Yeah, we've just broken this story in the last 20 minutes or so on Sky Sports News. My understanding was that Leicester and Palace were very close to doing a deal for Bilal El-Khanous at around £32 million. But then it just stalled a little bit last week with discussions over a structure of payments. And since then, Leicester have sold James Justin to Leeds and Casey McAteer to Ipswich. And I've been told that has cleared their PSR concerns, and so they now don't need to sell. And so that's changed the ballpark entirely from Leicester City's perspective. And I'm told, from their perspective, the deal to take El-Khanous to Selhurst Park is now dead. And Crystal Palace are looking at other potential options to replace Eberechi Eze. I mean, look, Palace had indicated they were prepared to pay £32 million potentially for El-Khanous in a structured deal. I'm now being told that Leicester are adamant they want £35 million and they want that up front. Because they don't need to sell now. Their circumstances have changed. So, look, that's just hot off the press. We'll see how that develops over the coming hours. But at the moment, it looks that one is dead.
Do you think if he stays at Leicester, would he be able to be reintegrated into the first-team squad? Because Marty Cifuentes was saying that he's not mentally right. His head's been turned a little.
Well, that's really interesting because he didn't play on Saturday in Leicester's win over Charlton, and a lot of people felt that the fact that he hadn't been included in the squad suggested that he's clearly going to Palace. They've rested him. They don't want him to get injured. Not so, as I understand it. You're right in Cifuentes feeling that his head wasn't right. His head had been turned by Crystal Palace. I don't see any problem in bringing it back in. I think he wasn't really agitating for a move as such. He was just a little bit. How do we say, conflicted, I suppose, is perhaps the best way to say it when a Premier League club came in for him and the chance to play. We think that'll move on. I suspect they'll bring him back into the fold.
OK, talking of conflicted and potential reintegrations or not,
we're going for the big one now.
Yeah, let's move straight to Alexander Isak, shall we? And will we now see some movement with regards to his future following last night's classic encounter between Newcastle and Liverpool? We understand two of Newcastle's board met with the Sweden striker at his house to discuss his future as he tries to push through a move to the champions. So before we hear from these two on it, we'll get to Keith Downey at St James's Park. Keith, very good to see you. What can Newcastle fans read into this meeting then at Isak's house?
Well, I think the positive thinking Newcastle United supporters could read into it that they are trying to come to some kind of agreement that will see Alexander Isak reintegrate with the first team squad and be available to Eddie Howe moving forward into the season. Remember, he's essentially refused to play in those first two matches against Aston Villa and then Liverpool, and I would suggest if he remains a Newcastle United player, he won't be available either to play Leeds United this weekend. But I think the more pessimistic amongst the Newcastle fans will think perhaps they're having a meeting to try and get some finality onto this. Now, until we find out exactly what happened between those four walls, we're going to have to sort of speculate and guess. But I think as we stand here right now, 6 days until the transfer window opens, I think all options are on the table. We could yet see Liverpool come back in. I think Alexander Isak still would like to move away from the football club, and it's dragged on for a long time now, this hasn't it? And you would have to suggest that it would probably be difficult for him to reintegrate back into the squad given the strength of feeling among the supporters. Just listening to some of the stuff I heard last night here at St James's Park, and then we see the banners from the fans. I think it would be difficult for him to reintegrate. But of course, if Liverpool don't come to the table with an offer that's acceptable to Newcastle, then he of course will remain a Newcastle United player. But behind all of this, and this has been the case for a number of weeks now, is that Newcastle are pretty much getting desperate when it comes to replacements. We know they tried to sign Benjamin Sesko as a replacement for Isak to allow him to go. They failed. They tried to sign Hugo Ekitike, who of course went to Liverpool and ironically scored here at St James's Park against Newcastle last night. They missed out on João Pedro and Liam Delap, and they've tried and failed a number of times, and they're still at the table, active in the market. And I think, look, if they manage to get maybe one for them, hopefully two, and I still think there's a chance Alexander Isak could leave between now and the closure of the transfer window. But Eddie Howe spoke post-match last night, didn't he? He appealed for clarity. He said he wanted the narrative to change, the story to move on. But as we stand here, a day after that Liverpool game, when I think a lot of us thought once the Liverpool game was out the way we could move on, we're still stood here in this grey area of what has become an absolute saga involving both Liverpool and Newcastle United.
Yeah, it's been a tough window for Newcastle, hasn't it? I mean, you mentioned the replacements. That's still the stance, isn't it? The club's position. They want replacements before considering letting Isak go. Can you see a situation where Isak is sold even if Newcastle don't sign a replacement?
Look, I think it would be difficult for them, but if the noise is coming from Isak are that he will refuse to play and he's not interested in being reintegrated, then yes, I think in an ideal world they would have two replacements in. I think, and I've been saying this for a number of weeks now, I think even if they got one replacement in now, and we know they've been trying to sign Johan Wissa from Brentford, we know they're interested in Jørgen Strand Larsen from Wales because they made that £50 million offer yesterday, which of course was turned down by Wolverhampton Wanderers. So we know that Newcastle have been trying, and I think if they were even to get in one, I think it would leave them with a decision to make on Alexander Isak. Ideally they would like two, of course. But then we see the situation with Anthony Gordon last night being sent off, so he's missing for the next 3 matches. So even the backup striker who's playing out of position is going to be missing. So it's a really, really tough situation they're in. I still see a scenario where Alexander Isak goes between now and Monday. I think in a not an ideal world, but in a preferable situation to Newcastle, they would have at least one player in. If they were able to get in both Wissa and Strand Larsen, of course, that would open the door for Alexander Isak if the offer is acceptable. But that's pretty much been the situation for weeks now, and Newcastle have found it hard up until now to bring in at least one replacement. And I have to say that story is continuing into this last week of the transfer window.
Keith, thank you very much. Well, poor Keith Downey, he wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning with nightmares about Alexander Isak, Carver. I'm sure he does.
I feel sorry for the poor guy. He's a heck of a window, Keith. He's done a fantastic job.
He's been there noon and night, hasn't he? Carver, let's cut to the chase. Do you think Isak will be a Liverpool player by the end of this window?
Oof. I mean, judging by what Keith says, I think there's a good chance that could happen, but only if Newcastle sign 2 forwards and only if Liverpool increase their offer. I could see it happening.
OK. Rob, I mean, Newcastle have been trying desperately to find a striker all summer, as Keith was just talking about. He mentioned yesterday they failed with a £50 million bid for Jørgen Strand Larsen. It seems like quite a lot of money for the Wolves attacker. They're obviously going to get quite a bit when they get rid of or sell Isak on. Do you think they'll go back in with an improved offer for Strand Larsen? Because 50 million is already pretty top.
It is. Look, the impression I get from the people I've been talking to is that Newcastle is a very well-run football club, and they're trying to work out what good value is here. And they know they're going to get, potentially, if they sell Isak, 110, 120 million pounds for him, potentially. So they can afford to buy Strand Larsen and probably Johan Wissa at Brentford as well. But they'd break the bank to do it and spend all of that money. And do they think that, with all due respect, Jørgen Strand Larsen and Johan Wissa are worth 120 million pounds for the two of them? I think they're keeping their financial situation very frugal and sensible. So look, they had a 50 million pound bid rejected by Wolves yesterday. Newcastle don't want to pay more than that. They don't think he's worth more than that. And I think it's a bit of a stalemate because Wolves categorically don't want to sell him. they don't want to sell him anyway, but they certainly don't want to sell him this late in the window when he's such a key player for them. And there's too little time in the window left for him to get a replacement in. And you go into Wissa, and then we get this whole domino effect, don't we, where Brentford rejected £40 million bid from Newcastle for Wissa last week. Brentford are considering a move for Max Bayer. And Borussia Dortmund is one of the options they're looking at, and he is potentially a replacement for Wissa. So they've not made an approach yet. Might they only make an approach if Newcastle do a deal for Wissa? And by the way, to continue that domino effect, Borussia Dortmund are closing in on Fabio Silva at Wolves, who's potentially a replacement for Bayer. So you look at all of that, and all the people that Carver and I are talking to in the industry right now are saying there's an awful lot of players that are ready to move, and an awful lot of clubs that want those players, but they need something to start the domino effect rolling. And that's why I think you and I both feel it's the quiet before the storm now, and a lot of these deals could happen when clubs get maybe a little bit desperate to move players on and bring new faces in with just 6 days of the window left.
Yeah, the old housing chain, isn't it? One little piece moves and then all of a sudden it can really start to flow. So can you see a scenario where Wissa and Strand Larsen are both at Newcastle? Do you think that's likely if you're a betting man?
Only if Brentford and Wolves are prepared to compromise on their asking prices. And I don't see either of those things happening right now. Look, I don't believe in this idea that everybody's been talking about where Newcastle have in mind a certain profile and value of player that they need to replace Callum Wilson, and then a separate profile and calibre of player and price to replace Alexander Isak. They need strikers. You know, I don't think Eddie Howe looks at his squad and goes, OK, well, you're a replacement for Callum Wilson, you're a replacement for... Which am I going to pick? Because I want to play the guy who's a replacement for Isak. It doesn't work like that. He needs bodies in, he needs two strikers. And I think they'll get the best deal they can. How much they spend and whether they get them, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see over the next few days. I genuinely don't know, and that's what makes this window so exciting. I don't know where it's going to go from here. I really don't.
Yeah, it's a bit of a thought for Will Osula as well. He's got a nice goal last night.
Well, exactly,
no one's talking about him. All right, let's talk of the domino effect then. One striker whose future has also been speculated upon throughout the window is Nicholas Jackson. I mean, Carve, Rob's spoken about that domino effect. Is Jackson waiting on the future of Isak to be resolved? Is that the natural order of things?
I think Chelsea are waiting to see what happens with Isak, whether he stays or whether he goes. Because whatever happens, it will have an effect on Nicholas Jackson's future. Because I think if Alexander Isak leaves Newcastle United, he's on a list of forwards that Newcastle are looking at. They're interested in him. They may make an offer. Chelsea are expecting significant bids for him in the next few days. And when I say significant, I think they value him now at around £70 million. There's been talk of him potentially going out on loan with an option. Chelsea are not interested in those kind of deals. It has to be either a permanent deal or a loan with an obligation. And from the player's perspective, he needs to go somewhere where he is the main man. Because he feels he's not the main man anymore at Chelsea. So I know there's been talk of him potentially going to Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich definitely interested in taking him. But obviously from his perspective, if he was to go to Bayern Munich, he's not going to get in the team ahead of Harry Kane. So he would have to think very carefully about that. But that's why I say Chelsea are waiting to see what happens with Isak. And then we could see major developments on Jackson.
Oh, it makes you long for the days of two strikers, doesn't it?
4-4-2.
The old 4-4-2. Whatever happened to that? Does Jackson feel like a better fit for Newcastle than the likes of Wissa and Strand Larsen, given that Chelsea are a higher profile club? Does it feel like that would be more of an upgrade?
Yeah, whenever I'm on here,
fans look at that.
Whenever I'm on here, there are certain presenters who are not very impressed with Nicholas Jackson. I won't name any names. And they're always sort of quite surprised at his valuation, and they think that he's not a particularly good finisher. And I try my best to be the devil's advocate and to put the other side of the story and say, OK, he does miss some chances, but a lot of strikers miss chances. His goal-scoring record in the Premier League is pretty good. He's very good turning defence into attack when teams counter-attack. I mean, he's a really, really good player. He's got some issues with his disciplinary record. Those have been well documented. But he certainly, I think, is somebody who could do a very good job for Newcastle. I'm just not sure whether Newcastle are totally convinced by him. Because obviously earlier this summer they were trying to sign Ekitike, they were trying to sign Sesko. So you would think those were their top targets. So maybe now they are sort of looking at their second, third, fourth targets. But who knows? Sometimes those second, third, fourth targets turn out to be better signings than your top targets.
OK, so Chelsea looking to get players out, Jackson included. There are some others. If they do get those players out, will they be looking to sign anyone themselves?
Well, still, they are, all systems go to try and sign Alejandro Garnacho from Manchester United. There have been reports today that clubs in Saudi Arabia are interested in signing him. He's committed to moving to Chelsea, but obviously a deal needs to be sorted out between Chelsea and United. They still want to sign Xavi Simons as well, but this all depends on what happens to Jackson and Nkunku. If those two leave, then Chelsea will press ahead for moves for both Garnacho and Simons. Also, another player they're interested in, but I think this is a real long shot, is the Barcelona attacking midfielder Fermin Lopez. Now, he's a young player at Barcelona. Why would you want to leave Barcelona? I think he's happy at Barcelona. He doesn't want to leave Barcelona. I think he is a Chelsea long-term target. I'm being told today, don't get too carried away with him. Yes, he's a player that Chelsea are interested in, but I think it'd be difficult to get him out of Barcelona. OK,
great stuff. We will leave it there for the time being. Less than a week to go in the window, isn't there? It's been a big summer of transfer activity at Manchester United. We'll have an update on the potential departures of Rasmus Højlund and Antony and their search for a new goalkeeper. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Plenty was expected of Rasmus Højlund when he arrived in the Premier League. Fair to say it hasn't happened for him so far. I mean, Rob, what's the latest on his future then?
Well, Napoli are still in talks, and our colleagues at Sky Italy feel that they're making pretty good progress. Di Marzio, who we know very well, is a bit of a transfer genius, is all over that one, and he thinks that the player wants to go to Napoli. I think what's interesting is that United have changed their strategy a little bit, and they don't want to let a lot of these players that are surplus to requirements from Ruben Amorim's point of view go on loan without there being some sort of substantive element to it. So United will let Højlund go, but they want a permanent element to the deal. And I think that suits Højlund as well. He, from what I'm hearing from his end, he wants a little bit of certainty in his future and where it goes from here. You know, a season on loan in Serie A and then coming back to Old Trafford is not ideal from him.
So an obligation to buy.
Well, but so Napoli seem to favour a loan with an option to buy.
Okay.
Manchester United are a bit more stringent. If it's not a loan with an obligation to buy, they'd certainly like it to be an obligation if there's a realistic, achievable goals, and that's where I think the discussions are focused at the moment. I think it's pretty similar with Garnacho, which Carve's a bit of an expert on.
Yeah, I mean, before we get on that show, Carve, we've seen Napoli revive players' careers. Not that Scott McTominay's career was particularly flagging, certainly going pretty well for Scotland, wasn't he? So this looks on paper like a pretty good move for Højlund.
Brilliant move for him. I mean, he's going to live and work in Naples. He's going to play in front of some of the most passionate supporters in the world, in one of the best grounds in the world. They're the Italian champions. They're in the Champions League. They're managed by Antonio Conte. He would be playing with Kevin De Bruyne, with Scott McTominay, with Billy Gilmore. You know, it's like it's a dream come true. I wish I was going with him. Unfortunately, there's no offers from Sky Italy for me.
You're stuck with us, mate. I'm sorry about that. Sorry.
But like, this is incredible. It could be a real sort of zero to hero story for him, because we've seen the way Napoli supporters have taken to Scott McTominay. If he goes in there, and Romelu Lukaku's injured at the moment, so he would start. He would be the main man. If he goes in there and starts scoring goals again, I think there will be murals going up of him all around Naples.
Do you think it's an easier league to score goals in if you're Rasmus Højlund than the Premier League?
Oof. He's asked you some stinkers today, hasn't he?
Well, given that, I mean, traditionally, Italian defences, things like that, we're seeing it's pretty tough to break through. But the Premier League, you know, some players come in, and Højlund being one of them, expected big things, hasn't quite happened. Is he more suited to Serie A?
Well, he's played there before.
And done well.
So, yeah, he's done well. So he's got the experience of playing there. Napoli will be set up to get the best out of him. He will be the main man. Yes, of course, he's going to have pressure playing in front of those supporters, but it'll be a different kind of pressure. Unfortunately, you know, great things were expected of him at United. It hasn't worked out for him. United spent a lot of money on him. But the flip side is that he's still really, really young. I think if he grabs this opportunity, if Napoli can do a deal with United, then it could be a fantastic move for him. And he can show the world what kind of player he really is, because we just haven't seen his best at this United side. But he's not the only player who's come to United and struggled.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, look, a lot of young players go to Manchester United, and the theatre of dreams can be pretty intimidating for any player. And it hasn't quite worked for Højlund at a time when Manchester United have been in the doldrums. It's not a normal Manchester United move, is it, for a player like that? And we've seen
service
it so
has probably not quite been the same as it would have been when Beckham
and confidence
and
levels, and you know, it's difficult for young players to sometimes, you know, be expected to be the talisman for a team when you're still developing yourself. And we've seen it happen so often with Manchester United. I wouldn't be surprised if Højlund left Manchester United and went and scored a hatful of goals wherever he goes next. And United fans will turn around and go, why couldn't he do that for us?
Of course, United won't recoup all the money they paid for Rasmus Højlund. I think the same could be said, Carve, for Anthony, who's another man who's struggled at the Theatre of Dreams. You've got news on him.
Yeah, I mean, from a human sort of perspective, he's had a really difficult time at United. He just wants to, you know, put it all behind him. He was on loan in Spain with Real Betis last season, had a good time there, got to the conference final against Chelsea, which unfortunately, from their point of view, they lost. But, you know, United have spent 86 million pounds on him when they signed him from Ajax. There's no way they're going to be getting anything like that back. But they are in talks with Betis again about him moving back there. I think obviously Betis are being quite clever because they know they're going to get a better deal closer and closer to the deadline, but it looks like he'll be moving back there.
OK, so they're people that players that Ruben Amorim wants out. How about more incomings? Rob, the goalkeeper situation, what's news there?
Look, goalkeeper wasn't a priority position for Manchester United in this summer window. It's been made pretty clear to me that they think they've had a good window. They looked at the stats. Manchester United's strategy now, with all of the people they've got in the right places, is that they want to focus on the data. They want to look at the stats that tell them where they need to improve. And all of those stats were telling them they didn't score enough goals last season. And so that's why they spent over £200 million on 3 new forward players, when a lot of Manchester United fans, I think, were calling out for midfielders and centre-backs maybe. They are calling for a new goalkeeper now. And whilst it wasn't at the top of Manchester United's priority, they see Senny Lemons as a really good option at Royal Antwerp, and he might cost just over £17 million. And I think United's recruitment guys are thinking that's too good an opportunity to miss, to buy up somebody of his talent and strengthening the goalkeeping group for the long term. It's far from certain that he'd come in and be Amorim's number one, and you've got to remember that Andre Onana is expected to leave for the Africa Cup of Nations and miss most of December and January. So they're going to be a goalkeeper down for 2 key months of the season. That's why they're interested. I think they'll get the deal done. But it sounds like Antwerp want to delay it a little bit and make sure that they get the full value for him. So negotiations ongoing as things stand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for data. And I'm all for improving a forward line if it suggests, that data suggests that the goals haven't been coming. But a lot of Manchester United fans are saying that they need a midfielder because they don't have legs, particularly in that kind of number 6 position where there's quite often 2 of them playing against 3 in there. Forget your inverted fullbacks and stuff. So don't they need to find that position as well? And then that can then lead to patterns of play that will help goal scoring as well.
That sounds spot on.
There's no data there. That's just a bit of common sense.
Well, and that's what a lot of Man United fans are feeling.
Like a data analyst.
It was really quite impressive, that, wasn't it? But it's also, listen, he's also copying Gary Neville here, because that's what Gary Neville said.
I didn't know that.
Monday night.
That was all my own work.
That's exactly what Gary Neville said. And so if you're agreeing with Gary Neville and a lot of Manchester United fans agree, then I think that's a fair point. My understanding is that United know that they can't solve all of their problems in one transfer window. And so they're almost breaking it down and trying to be very strategic about this. And the focus for this window was up front. And they've brought in 3 world-class players, haven't they? In Benjamin Šeško, Brian Mbeumo and Mateus Cunha. For 200.
They haven't scored yet.
No, they haven't.
It's good data.
That's good data.
It's good data.
0 goals. It's early.
What about the XG, though?
Well, exactly. He'll tell you. He'll know. He'll know that. So look, my understanding now is that United would still like to be active in the last 6 days of this window. And that's having sorted out their forward line as far as they see it and their attacking options. Now's when they're looking at goalkeepers and midfielders. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they brought a midfielder in before the window closes, but that may rely on what we've just been talking about, getting Anthony out, getting Garnacho out, getting Højlund out. Yeah. They need to clear some players out of a huge squad, a bloated squad, and they need to free up some money as well. If they do that in the next couple of days, I think they could be busy in the last few days in terms of incomings. Yeah, we will watch this space. Man United's goal scorer this season, Rodrigo Muniz of Fulham, with an own goal. Now, we will get to Edu and Nuno. Espirito Santo are at the heart of a disagreement at Nottingham Forest, but what impact will that have on the club's late transfer business? We'll analyse that next.
Well, welcome back to the Transfer Show. Never quiet at Nottingham Forest. We've got news on them this afternoon. Rob, what can you tell us? Someone making the move across the East Midlands, I understand.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's strange because all we've talked about at Nottingham Forest for the past 5 days has been, well, let's be honest, the last 2 weeks has been this rift between the manager, Nuno Espirito Santo, and the owner,
we'll get to that,
Evangelos Marinakis. But even in the midst of all of that, Forest are still trying to do business. With Edu as their global head of football pulling the strings, they're still trying to make signings. And this guy that you're talking about, my understanding, Forest have made an approach to Leicester for fullback Victor Christiansen. And remember, Nuno said after the game at the weekend that he wants a goalkeeper and 2 fullbacks before the window closes. There's Christiansen on your screen now. There remains contact between the 2 clubs, and Leicester, I understand, are potentially open to selling him. But I've been told there's still a gap between the 2 clubs in terms of valuation for the player. Leicester won't sell him on their cheap. And Forest still trying to do business despite everything that's going on at the top of the club. OK, let's get to the top of the club, though, because we know that Edu and Nuno are at the heart of this disagreement at the City grounds. Where does Evangelos Marinakis sit in it? Does he have a side in this? Tense times ahead over the next few days. We were, as a Forest fan, worried about the future of Nuno and Forest last week. I think there's still reason to be worried about the future of Nuno as Forest manager. He's been outspoken against the owner pretty personally and pretty directly, or Edu, whichever way you read it, twice in the space of a week. Remember, ahead of the first game of the season, he came out and he said the squad isn't strong enough, but implying almost that the club had been negligent in doing its transfer business over the summer. That didn't go down well with Evangelos Marinakis, I can tell you. And then he followed it up with the pre-match news conference before the weekend game, saying that the relationship with that man on your screen was no longer as close as it was, and they weren't getting on, suggesting there was a rift between the 2. Marinakis doesn't like that. He's not a man to cross, and I suspect long-term that won't bode well for Nuno Espirito Santo. But at the moment, it's been made very clear to me that there's a bit of a ceasefire, if you like, on both sides. Both sides are trying to focus on keeping their powder dry to try and, for the good of the team, if you like, because none of this is helping the squad, who I know have felt unsettled by this, not sure whether Nuno's going to be their manager going forward. He's very close to the players, not sure where the club's going. It's felt bizarre, if I'm honest with you, because Nottingham Forest are enjoying the best spell in 30 years. They've got their strongest squad in 30 years. They've got European football. And yet the 2 most important figureheads at the club, the manager and the owner, and the global head of football in Edu, are all at loggerheads and doing it very, very publicly. I know Marinakis doesn't like that. He wants those sorts of disagreements to be kept behind the scenes. But Nuno is clearly feeling very insecure and worried about his future, which is why he's gone public with it. It's all very distasteful, I think, and it's really hard on the Forest fans. I've got huge sympathy for them, because which side do they take here? The owner versus the manager? They love them both. They've both done a fantastic job at the club. And yet there's almost open warfare between the 2 at the moment. Listen, that open warfare has been put to one side, as I understand it, for now. What happens once we get to the international break next week could be interesting to see.
What's interesting is that this is happening during the transfer window. So I know a lot has been made of the fact that potentially there could be a personality clash between Nuno and Edu. But is it to do with potential signings? Is it, for instance, Forest signing players that Nuno necessarily didn't want, or Nuno wants to sign players that Edu doesn't necessarily want? Because the timing of it is very, very interesting. The other point I would make is I'm really picking up some unease amongst Premier League club owners about the way their head coaches, because they would call them head coaches and not managers, behave when they are holding their press conferences.
They're using it as an opportunity to make points, I guess.
Exactly. And from the owner's point of view, the new breed of owner, you are a club employee and you have to stick to the script. You can't use your press conferences as a platform to air your own personal grievances and say, I think we should do this, I think we should be signing this kind of player. That is not what you should be doing. These new owners think you represent the club and you've got to go out there and stick to the message. And when the head coaches don't stick to the message, I think you see the problems that we've seen at quite a few Premier League clubs in the last couple of weeks.
OK, we are going to move on to West Ham, who go to Wolves tonight in the Carabao Cup, desperate for a first win of the season. Carve, they want midfielders and plenty of them.
Yeah, I think they're trying to basically buy every midfielder in France, Italy, Germany. There was a really, really good column by Martin Samuel in the Times yesterday. Really, really hard hitting. And he just said, if West Ham don't sign some players, they will go down. They've gone down in the past with, squads packed with brilliant players. He said this squad is certainly not packed with brilliant players. They've made a terrible start to the season. They need to sort things out in the transfer market. Again, Rob made the point that you can't fix all your problems in one window. But in the next few days, West Ham really, really need to try and fix some of their problems. One of their big problems is in midfield. You know, they just don't have legs in there. They're looking at signing, I think, 2 midfielders. They are close to agreeing a deal with Monaco to sign their defensive midfielder, Sugutu Magassa, for around 20 million euros. They also made an approach to Forest for Ibrahim Sangare. That could be a loan plus an obligation. They're also interested in the Strasbourg midfielder Junior Mwanga. Also, Middlesbrough's Hayden Hackney, who looks like a real player, according to one of our producers. And also...
What does he know? She know?
He knows a lot, actually. He supports Birmingham, so...
he's a good lad.
He's seen a lot of Hayden Hackney. And also, they're trying to sign an attacking midfielder from Werder Bremen called Romano Schmidt. So I think somebody at West Ham has read Martin Samuel's column because they are trying to make those signings that they need to make before the window closes.
How much relies on Graham Potter's future here? Because it feels like his future is key here. Are the West Ham ownership prepared to back him at this stage in the window, or are they considering, well, OK, we know it's not going down particularly well with the fans at the moment?
I think money's tight at West Ham. The West Ham has spent a lot of money on transfers in the past few windows.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the sort of spend, it's been bigger than a lot of the big European clubs. So there comes a point when the sort of, the money starts to run out. And also, there's been all the uncertainty about Lucas Paqueta, what was going to happen to him, whether he's going to stay or whether he's going to go. So these are really, really difficult times for West Ham supporters.
Difficult times for West Ham. Money not running out, though, at Arsenal. They've spent £260 million in this window as they chase that elusive Premier League title. And Carver, they might not be finished there. Mikel Arteta looking to the Bundesliga to sign another defender. What can you tell us?
Well, they're trying to sign Piero Hincapié from Bayer Leverkusen. Now, interestingly, he has got a release clause which is around 60 million euros, but he's made it clear that he wants to leave, he wants to move to Arsenal. So I think Arsenal have got a little bit of leverage there to try and get him for below his release clause. But this all depends on Arsenal being able to sell players as well, because they've spent a lot of money, but they haven't really recouped very much at all so far. They're in talks to sell Jakob Kivior to Porto. That deal, I think, is a loan plus an obligation, could be worth around 25, 30 million pounds. I think if that goes through, then they would have a better chance of signing Hincapié. But it's really, really important that he wants to move to Arsenal.
OK, let's move on to Jamie Vardy, who still hasn't been snapped up since he ended his love affair with Leicester. No better man to speak to, of course, with Leicester and Vardy than you, Rob. Where could he end up then?
I don't know.
You don't know? I thought we had breakfast with the Vardys.
I'm sorry. But he doesn't know. He doesn't know, and neither do his representatives at the moment. Look, I think the thing you have to remember is that Jamie Vardy's a free agent, so he's not tied to this transfer window. If he doesn't have a club by the time we get to 7 p.m. on Monday, it's no problem for him. There'll be still clubs out there that didn't do their business, that need a striker, and he can move to any of them as a free agent.
Is that quite a good tactic for him then? We'll just let it run out.
He could have... There are several... It's been made very clear to me there are several clubs he could have signed for already. Some of those in the Premier League. A number of them in Europe as well, before now. But I think he thinks that there's some bigger and better options still to come. We've talked about the clubs that are going to have to do some business late in the window, and they're not all going to hit their first targets. So an experienced striker like Jamie Vardy available on a free transfer, could be a good option for people. His most immediate option is Italian club Cremonese. They've made him an offer. They think it's a very, very good offer, and he's considering that. And I think the project there does kind of appeal to him. Cremonese's a bit of an underdog story in their own right in Serie A, and of course Jamie Vardy loves that. He's spent his entire career being that in his own mind. But I think he's going to assess his options as the window progresses. Him and his representatives are very relaxed about it. He spent most of the summer in Portugal, training on his own, keeping fit. He's ready to go. And there are a lot of options already on the table, and I think he'll take his time to decide which one he fancies when he gets closer to the deadline.
Great stuff. I love the fact I don't know. These guys know a lot, but if they don't know, they'll just say so. Back in a bit. Celtic have the chance to reach the Champions League group phase tonight, but will they get over the line in Kazakhstan? We'll speak live to former Celtic defender Marc Wilson next. Welcome back. Celtic are in Kazakhstan this evening for the second leg of their Champions League playoff with Kairat Almaty. Looking to reach the league phase of the competition, we can speak now to former Celtic defender Marc Wilson. Marc, very good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. The tie's finally poised after a goalless first leg. Is it going to be a nervy night then for Celtic?
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think this competition, the Celtic fans are used to nervy occasions, but when it's a qualifier to get in to the league phase after the drama last year, then, you know, it's going to be an evening full of nerves for those fans watching at home. And I think the Celtic fans, the team and the manager would have sincerely preferred a better scoreline going into this. 0-0 was not what the Celtic fans required, and it's going to be a tough evening out there in Kazakhstan.
OK, we're just looking at the team news. Anthony Ralston in for Alistair Johnston. Yang comes in for Adam Eder. What do you make then of the lineup that Brendan Rodgers has gone with?
Well, it certainly stands out that Adam Eder takes his place on the bench. You know, £9 million last year was a lot of money, and you expect a player of that value to play in the big games, and this is certainly a big game. Yang coming in on the side will mean Daizen Maeda will go through the middle, and of course he had a fantastic season through the middle last year, scored plenty of goals and can stretch defences. I think the midfield takes care of itself. Nygren has been a real positive coming into the Celtic side. But I think when you look deeper and you look at the Celtic bench, that's where a lot of the complaints from the Celtic fans lie, that the squad is a bit thin on the ground. And in terms of options, has Brendan Rodgers really got a lot of things aren't going his way tonight on that bench?
OK, if they fail to progress, Mark, to the Champions League group stage, what would that mean for Brendan Rodgers and for Celtic?
Well, hugely frustrating. Of course, the finances that come with the Champions League phase is huge. £40 million to the club. And the Celtic fans, they know their club's cash rich. The complaint is they don't spend it quickly. And I'm sure Brendan Rodgers thinks that at the same time as well. But of course, the finances dwindle. You want to be at the top table. And I think when you progress from the league phase last year and you have those real prestige fixtures, like the ones against Bayern Munich, you want a taste of it every year. And, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, Celtic crashed out at this stage before. So, you know, Celtic fans remember that. They certainly won't want to drop down to the Europa League tonight.
OK, Mark, thank you very much. Updates from Mark throughout the evening, so we'll hear plenty more from him. We'll also hear plenty more over the coming week about this man, Alexander Isak, the saga that has dominated the window. Will he now be on the move now? Liverpool and Newcastle have met last night. More next.